I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks. Welcome to Hard Knocks. In this episode, I speak with Aella, a writer, data researcher, and former top-earning OnlyFans creator who is best known for pushing the boundaries of sexuality, psychology, belief, and taboo with a lot of her provocative research and experimentation. She writes personal essays and does data-driven surveys and all around, and also throws great parties. I talk about meeting Aella at one of such parties. I talk to her about how it is that we determine truth, how it is that we discover what we want in our lives. What are the costs and benefits of status and visibility? How do you rationalize your way through life? Altogether, great philosophical stuff. Aella's very smart and interesting, and I hope you have a great time listening. Hello, Aella. Welcome to Hard Knocks.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to speak with you. The first time that we ever met in person, I was extremely pregnant.
I remember this, yeah.
What was that party that you hosted? What was this gathering?
The Glitter Trash Bash.
The Glitter Trash Bash, yes.
I was just thinking about that party earlier today. It was a really good one. I think it happened at the right time because I think wasn't it during COVID where everybody had to be tested and quarantined to come?
Yeah, yes. We definitely had to get tested. So people were just really excited to be around other people again. And could you just describe the circumstances of that party? What kind of party was this?
It was we had a COVID house in the middle of nowhere. It was big, and I guess we just invited a bunch of people to come stay, and everybody was desperate, right? Because nobody had been to parties, and this is you can invest in this one because I think we required some level of quarantine beforehand and maybe a PCR test to come, and so nobody had been to a place before that, and the dress code was trashy glitter.
Trashy glitter. It
turned out to be a great dress code. Yeah. And you looked great. I remember you looked angelic.
Well, I was going for I am a glowing goddess that is about to give birth was essentially the vibe I was going for.
It works.
Thank you. Okay, so today I would love to talk to you. I mean, well, honestly, I just realized that you're one of those people out there who exist in the world who only needs one name for people to know who you are. How do you feel to be in the, along the lines of Cher and, and Hitler?
Cher and Hitler.
How does it feel?
Pretty nice. It was accidental. I never intended. I was never let's deliberately do a mononym and then people will think I'm cool or something. Just happened to be, yeah. But it worked out. It worked out because I chose a mononym that's not very. It's not Bob or something. You could never pull it off.
There are too many Bobs. There are not enough Aellas. So I want to talk to you because, because you're a lovely person, but also because I think one thing that you are deeply invested in is interrogating reality, understanding truth, and doing so also by living your life like an experiment. And I was wondering if you could tell me just in the ways that you treat your life like a laboratory and experiment with things like psychedelics and polyamory and data tracking, all of those things. First of all, how do you go about that?
I don't know. Way of being, maybe? I think starting from a position of deep curiosity helps. You're I wonder what's going on. I think there's something where you have to be maybe everybody else is wrong a little bit. Because I think it helps me just because I used to be very religious and then I stopped being religious. And that was a whole process of realizing that everybody was completely wrong. All of the authorities, the people who were educated, people who had gone through seminary and were in positions of leadership over many people who obeyed them. And they spoke with very confident tones. I'm oh, you can have that whole system and have that system be based completely on something that's wrong, which means that you have to sort of question everything now. I think for me, this is a little bit trivial, but it happened really around gay people. Because I remember feeling disgust about gay people in the world that I was brought up in because we were told that they were terrible.
Right.
And then coming to realize like there's nothing really wrong with being gay, and like the disgust that I feel is not a good guiding light for this. So it's just like, let's think about this sort of from first principles. Is there anything bad happening? If no, let's try it. And if you just apply that principle to everything, like hygiene, for example, or, doing psychedelics. I remember I took LSD and I was like, okay, I did this. I know that people don't do LSD a lot. I wonder if there's a reason, but can I see the reason? No. Okay. I'm going to just try doing more and we'll see what happens.
Awesome. That's fascinating that like the sort of the ideological truth that had been presented to you instilled itself in you, not just intellectually, but also viscerally. Like you felt, which is interesting to me because like one of the questions that I was going to ask you is how do you determine how something is true? Like, and how do we do that if so much of what we rely on is if it feels true or not?
I mean, on some level, you can never escape that, right? Like on some level, my sense of truth is going to be a feeling. But I mean, there's lots of like ways you can use to figure this out. Like I think, for example, prediction markets are lovely for this reason, because if you put money on a belief, then it hurts when you're wrong. And I think it's just so important to be hurt when you're wrong to some degree. Like even if it's something as trivial as like mana and like everybody sees your points go down or something kind of silly. It's going to actually pay a cost because so many people's beliefs like don't pay rent. You just have beliefs living in your head and they never perform any meaningful function. You never like get hurt when they're wrong and you never get rewarded when they're right. So you can just like believe that they're right for no good reason. So I think that's pretty important. Like, or often like getting into a habit of like, oh, I seem to believe this about the world. Okay, if I believe this, what does this actually predict? Like, what if my beliefs were true? What kind of world would we exist in which they are true? And then like sort of thinking that through very in detail, I think helps a lot.
Okay, cool. That's interesting that I mean, I on the one hand totally agree with you that it makes sense that like for you to be able to determine whether or not something is true or not, you should be able to, there should be some sort of feedback, right? Like if you're right, then good, yay, good feedback. If you're wrong, meh, bad feedback. But the other thing that I have found is that when people are wrong and they suffer consequences for being wrong, another way that they respond is by like radically being defensive and like doubling down on their false beliefs. So like, like when it comes to like the truth paying rent or, these ideas paying rent, like how do we navigate that dilemma?
Yeah, I mean, I also thought about this a lot, but I mean, like, like right now I'm thinking a lot about status. I'm writing a series on status and thinking of things in those from that lens. So maybe it's not a fully holistic lens, but at least this is what I'm trying out right now. Yeah. I think that like there's something like very high status about being right. Because like you have access to some sort of truth, and having access to truth is useful to other people. You become directly useful if you are in possession of something other people do not know. And so a lot of people really become attached to being in possession of something they do not know, because it doesn't just mean that you know something, but rather that other people need you, or other people look up to you, or other people like want your approval in some way. You have like power over people. And so unfortunately, like belief or lack of belief in truth is a very social activity. This is probably why people have like a lot of defensive maneuvers around it, because you're not just challenging their belief, you're challenging like their position in the social hierarchy. Which like kind of rightfully so. I mean, I know the feeling. Like I have like a lot of idealistic opinions about how good it is to be truth seeking and how like maybe I'm kind of good at this. And then, you just sort of notice that in the back of your mind, you're rejecting something because you just sort of don't want to have to admit that you're wrong, because it's just very painful and embarrassing.
Yeah. I feel like all of this is sort of being informed a bit by a recent interview that I did on Hard Knocks, where I interviewed Rebecca Lemov, who just wrote a book called The Instability of Truth. And it's about, the history of like brainwashing and mind control, but also looks towards current day and hyper persuasion and like soft brainwashing that happens through, Facebook algorithms and all of that stuff, the kind of stuff that sort of guides us subconsciously to do or think or believe certain things, including buy, this, that, or the other. And one of the things that I was talking to her about was, on the one hand, we have technology that allows us to have some more transparency, to understand how information is presented to us and whether or not it is accurate. But at the same time, coming on the heels of like videos that show what really happened in a certain situation, we have AI that's able to create videos and to falsify them. And so again, we're left with this dilemma of like, how do you determine what is true? And if it's not an institution that you trust, what is it? And I think one of the things that's going to arise, or at least this is me just guessing, is that people are going to look more to specific people, to be, instead of institutions being the gatekeepers who determine what is true or not, it's going to be people that they like, icons of a kind that become people's sort of chosen, curated, like a curator of specific information. And I wonder if like the reason why this question has come up for me is I find it's interesting that you're really interested in status right now, because in a way, I imagine that you are probably, for many, many, many people out there, one of those gatekeepers of information and truth. And how does it feel to be in a position like that?
A gatekeeper of information. You're saying that like currently we sort of have a thing where people trust some people's individual opinions quite a lot, and you think we're going to continue trending in this direction.
Yes.
Yeah. And then also that I am one of these people to some degree. It's really, I think, interesting because I think I inhabit a pretty weird intersection because I'm a prostitute also. And this is like extremely low status in most people's hierarchies. But then also I write a bunch of words that people kind of take seriously. It's weird. And it's like being very, very high on one and very low on the other, I think is pretty rare. And so you get like a very wide variety. And then there's interesting status wars between these things, right? Because like if some people take you not seriously, they become like actively threatened. If people do take you seriously, if people do take you seriously, they become like very defensive if people don't. And so it's like causes a lot of strife, which I think is accidentally one reason why I'm well known. So just because of that diversion. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of what I'm writing is just questions. And some of it is like, I guess I do surveys and I'm like, here's the results from my surveys. A lot of people like complain that I don't draw enough conclusions from them. I think my narrative about myself is that I have a higher bar for confidence than most people. Have you ever had the thing where you're learning about a topic and you're like, oh, I don't really know much about this, and everybody else is like very confident about it, and then you learn a little bit more about the topic and then you realize everybody else is full of shit. And they were
Yes.
just like really confidently repeating stuff. And you're like, wait, I was duped this whole time. Like I actually did know more than this person. I was just like, oh, well, you said it with, a very aggressive tone.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm kind of rambling. I don't know if this is really an answer to your question, but.
No, I mean, I guess have you considered at all that you're like, do you think that you're somebody that people look to for guidance via, be it through like information or analysis? Do you feel like you have an audience of people who are looking to you as being a gatekeeper for understanding reality as it is?
Just some weird, like when I think about it directly, this seems obviously true. Like sometimes I write something and then I see people reference the thing I wrote, like, oh, well, Aella has evidence about this. I'm like, oh, I seem to be functioning, I guess, with what you're describing. But it doesn't internally feel like that. Maybe because most of the feedback that you get are people yelling at you. And so, so a lot of my experience on the internet is, being told that I don't know anything. So I'm like, oh, I'm not a gatekeeper for anything. I'm like just like scrambling and trying not to drown. But there are a lot of people that do seem to take what I'm writing in like a serious way and update based on, like, for example, one of my recent posts, the other sexual orientation, where I argue that like BDSM sexuality is as much of, if not more so, an orientation than being gay or straight. Like that seems to just be like updating a lot of the way people orient to it, which is really cool. It's really cool to like be that kind of generator of knowledge.
So it sounds like that's so interesting that you don't consider yourself like an authority per se.
Yeah, I guess I am kind of an expert in fetishes. That does seem true. But there's not much to say about the fetishes. That I don't know. The more I learn about sexuality, I'm like, the more anybody thinks they know what's going on with sexuality, they're fucking wrong. Everybody has so many strong opinions about the way sexuality works, and I just continue to get more and more confused the more data I get. But I guess I'm just like an expert in being very confused about fetishes. Maybe I'm just
Okay.
well enough informed about this topic that I know what kinds of questions to ask.
Well,
Something.
I think maybe that's where people are sort of drawn to you is like, I think deep down everyone is confused, and first of all, your confusion resonates with them, but also you've gone down the rabbit hole a little bit farther than most people have. So they're looking to you as like, oh, here's somebody who's also fallen down the rabbit hole that I want to fall down. And they've gotten a little farther than me, so maybe they can hold my hand through it.
Yeah. I would like to hold people's hand through like the process of curiosity. Like, I have some answers in the sex field, but I have a whole bunch of not answers. But a lot of people like come into thinking about this, thinking they already have the answers. And it's just like a big unlearning process to realize like all the things that you think you know, you should actually, in fact, be way less confident and way more confused about how this works. And like that in itself feels like a really important process, not just for like learning about sex, but for learning about a lot of things about the world.
Mm-hmm. So is that how, like, the one thing that is your anchor then is that a deep sort of faith in curiosity itself? Because I do think that, like, one thing that people generally feel is when they, like, open that Pandora's box, suddenly, like, all of the like, if they start questioning the institutions and questioning all of their belief systems, there is that feeling of instability. And so how do you anchor yourself in a way that is, like, philosophically responsible?
I do think curiosity is more important, but take it in sort of even a deeper level. Like if you're questioning something and you're starting to feel insecurity about like what this means for your life or something, then that means there's something else to be curious about here, right? Like, oh, it's really interesting that the fact that I want to question this is causing me to be afraid of rejection. And then you can be like, do I have a tension within myself with like between being honest with myself and being honest with other people? And so like you can sort of move the curiosity into a different direction. And I think a lot of people sort of hesitate against the curiosity because they think they know what the answer is going to be and they think the answer is intolerable. Like, oh, if I come to not believe this thing, then the consequences for this will be massive. And I'm like, well, it doesn't necessarily have to be massive, right? Like your fear is very important. And like, you should be curious about the fear instead of like trying to suppress it and make it go away and act like it's bad or whatever. Like, maybe my disgust when I was growing up around gay people, was like serving a really important function. Like it was giving me, cohesion with my community. Maybe like in a more ancient time, it would have increased the birth rate or something. And it's like being able to honor that and be like, oh yeah, I feel this way for a reason. I don't need to get rid of it. I just need to be curious about what is, not using curiosity as like a bludgeon to try to get into a different state. And then usually you find like shifts occur that you couldn't even predict that they would have occurred,
I think that I like that idea of being curious about for the things that you're afraid of. Like being afraid of something is information. And I also feel like I'm drawn towards the things I'm afraid of because I just don't like being afraid of them. And I feel like if I approach them, I am going to encounter something that's less scary than what I have in my brain. But I think the other thing is that I haven't really considered right now, but I think that is worth considering is also the things that you find yourself weirdly attracted to, which doesn't make any sense. Like, so for example, like I've never had a disgust reaction to gay people. I've actually had like an irrational attractive sort of thing,
nice.
even though like I'm like frustrated, like just you and me, I'm like frustratingly heterosexual because I like have so many crushes on gay people. Which I don't understand. Like, I see a gay couple and it just like brings me an inordinate amount of joy, and I don't know why.
Is it like affection, or does it feel like a sexual thing also?
I mean, it feels affectionate, I think, but like I'm just like, but like. I don't know. I should go down that rabbit hole and figure out if there's something sexual to that. But like what comes in my brain is like, for instance, I follow on Instagram these two models who are like best friends. I have no idea if they're lovers, but they're called the Goddess Boys. Are you familiar with
No,
them?
I'm not.
Okay, well, they just have this like amazing vibe, and their aesthetic is like sun moon. They're like these beautiful like complements to each other, and I don't know. There's just something about them that I find just captivating. Like I just want to like hang out with them. And I don't know why. There's like no rational reason for it. And so I'm just curious, like, now I'm sort of like curiosity going down the rabbit hole, like, why would that be? And I guess one question that I want for you is like, when you find yourself feeling curious about something, how do you formulate a question that will give you some kind of, that you know will provide you with some kind of insight into an answer?
Well, that's a crazy question. It's just good. It's just a lot. I don't know. I think like there's like this. I don't know if you've ever had the sensation of like being a conduit of God, in sort of I don't, not literally, but like there's a sensation sometimes in like very nice mental states where it's like you sort of relax all that you think that you are supposed to be, and you sort of just like become a channel for, you know, some sort of creativity. Maybe you're dancing or doing art, and you're just like, you know
Sure.
what? Fuck it. I'm not trying to be anything. I am just like, I'm watching myself create this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like you let go and you just let your attention become what it is in some way. And I think a lot of curiosity is the same, like curiosity in the same way as an art form, in the same way of like
Mm.
dancing or expression, or like that curiosity is exactly that sort of thing. And so just being able to like creatively let go and see what questions like arise inside of yourself. It's like the divine guiding thing. I mean, I'm not being very articulate, but
No, no, no. I'm hearing you. I know that, like, I know that flow state when you feel like y- I've definitely been in that flow state where you like you, for whatever reason, like the way that you are moving or guiding yourself in a particular moment feels like there are just no obstacles, because like the way that I feel it is just like, oh, this is the direction the universe is going, and I just like weirdly perfectly tapped into it for a second there, and I'm unstoppable is a little bit the feeling. So okay.
like there's a lot of like curiosity of like I think it's like often we ask the questions we think we're supposed to be asking, and we don't ask the questions we think are answered already, even if we might not personally know. Like I notice this all the time. I'll be like listening to two smart people talking about something that I kind of know a little bit about, and I have a desire to know about this thing. I want to be the kind of person that knows what they're talking about. And in this state, which is I'm like showing like kind of extreme state, you know, but in this state, all of my curiosity just completely drops. They say a word that I don't know, and I don't even notice I don't know the word. It's like my brain tries to fill in the gaps of knowledge and convince myself that I know it, right? Like, so, like I'm trying, so I'm like straining. My identity is straining in a direction, and it just cuts off all access to wanting to know what's happening.
I had a question about being experimental, because you know, you conduct surveys, but also you just take risks and you try things. And do you find that by experimenting with different things that you are sort of whittling down and figuring out exactly what you are, or do you feel like you are changing over time? Like, yeah, in the process of experimenting, does the experiment itself change you?
Just some, I mean, it puts you in a different place in relation to society, I think is important. Like I would say, like, for example, getting into escorting would be like, in a sense, an experiment. Like I was afraid of doing it. Everybody said that escorts are having a terrible time. And I was like, well, I don't know that for myself. I haven't tried it. Let's try an experiment and then find out. And it was really scary. And then I did it. I was like, this is kind of fine. But then like once you shift into like being okay with the outcome of an experiment, and it's like, it's almost necessarily a shift into that outcome, because if it's an experiment, that means you don't know. Or that means it is something that's like society doesn't know. So you are almost definitionally like moving away from society in some way, especially if it's something that has to do anything with taboo. And so, like, I definitely am now kind of weird. Like, I have very strange habits. Many of them are downstream of like me directly trying a thing and realizing that a very unusual thing works better for me. And so I think I'm like figuring out what I am, but like the process of like society coming to terms with that and me coming to terms with society and like becoming farther and farther away from them feels like it's always something that's hard, or I'm like learning a new relationship to it or something.
Like do you feel like you're, yeah, I guess, do you feel like you're self-isolating by virtue of becoming yourself?
To some degree, but from mainstream, like I'm increasingly finding friends in community that are like the weirdos like me, but it is like a little bit more insular, right? Because like the total pool of people that like understand or like are doing a similar thing is decreasing, which is a little sad. But I would rather have it, it's like it's nicer to sort of be fully self-expressive in this way, to not to pursue it, to pursue knowledge no matter the ends. Tree of forbidden fruit. I'm into that. I would have eaten the shit out of that tree.
Yeah, that's a great, I think that's a beautiful metaphor, because it is. It's like, it's not just you walked into any orchard and you're just like, tasting all the fruits in the tree. You're going straight for the forbidden fruits, and you're going,
the one that nobody else has tasted, right? That's where the greatest alpha information is. This is the one that everybody freaks out about the most, which is a little frustrating, because like I think a lot of people perceive me as being like deliberately an edgelord, and I'm like, well, I am an edgelord if I am interested in the edge of what we're thinking about, right? Like almost necessarily, you just, if I were interested in the other stuff, it would be less. Everybody already knows that stuff.
Got it. Do you feel like even as you are like experimenting with different things and pushing it back against taboo, do you feel stable? Or is it inherently destabilizing? Like, do you feel like, I mean, you're talking about how part of the process has led you to be sort of whittling down the number of people that you can fully relate to. And I'm wondering if that feels destabilizing, because I think I think a lot of people potentially don't want to experiment in their life because they're afraid of losing that sense of stability and that sense of being able to lean on the people that they can lean on. Do you think is it worth it?
I think people know it for themselves if it's worth it. Like if you are really afraid of losing that stability, then like probably some part of you is being quite wise about it. Like some part of you legitimately recognizes that like this is not a nutrient in your life you can risk losing. And I think for me, some part of me just knew that I could risk losing it. I've always been like very independent and alone, and always like I've like moved alone to different cities many times in my life. And like I'm pretty introverted. So I think some part of me was like, all right, is this trade-off? Am I willing to take the risk? And it's like, yes. And I think it's always like a gamble. You never know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Like life never works out perfectly for everybody. Yeah. But in general, I feel like I trust where people are at. Like if you just sort of sit there and like look into your deeper impulse, like what does your gut want? I mean, it might not be like the thing that you should act on, but it usually has like really important information that you should at least like take very seriously, even if it, doesn't feel like it matches up with what you think you should want of yourself.
Do people come to you looking for guidance on how to figure out what they want?
I don't know if anybody comes to me for people tweet at me. Like, it's like do people email? I mean, sometimes like I have friends and then, we do the thing where friends ask each other for advice.
Yeah. Okay.
Do people do that to you?
Well, a lot of people reach out to me asking for guidance on things like, how do I not be utterly destroyed by this terrible thing that's happening to me?
Oh,
That's typically what like people sort of come to me for that
sick.
Kind. Like it's a cool thing to be an expert on.
I don't know. It's just like, it's like not a thing that a lot of people are able to give that to others,
Yeah. I mean, it's a great feeling. I no doubt. Like I was not expecting when I was going through the experience of being, the bad thing that I went through, I was not thinking that I was going to be a resource to people later on. Like that was not what I was imagining. And in fact, one of the biggest painful things was thinking that I would never be able to actually have a place with other people. Like I just would be forever sort of isolated from other people because of this crazy experience, and that was completely unrelatable and overwhelming and hard to like process for myself, much less another human being. So yes, like being a resource for others is really, really fulfilling. And but but I'm not an expert, say, on, again, like asking those questions of what is a deep impulse, like even just identifying what a deep impulse is. Like I think people have feelings and inclinations, but like then turning that into an intellectual exercise is a whole other skill set that I feel like you've become an expert in, that other people might benefit from your experience. So like how do you, again, like draw from some visceral impulse and turn it into an intellectual exercise?
I mean, like to be able to cognitively recognize that you have an impulse and then be able to like work with it in your mind, you mean?
Yeah, and even identify what it is. Like, talk about, like talking about just sexual impulses, for example. Like I remember very, very early on in my youth, a boyfriend asking me like, "Oh, what do you like?" And I had no idea
Yeah.
how to answer that question. He was like, "You don't have like a fantasy?" And I was like, I've never had a like I don't have any because I just don't know. Like I just like this whole thing that is sex. I don't know anything about it, much less the nuances of it. And I wonder if I wonder if that's a good metaphor or an example of how any of us are drawn to anything. It's not just like specific like sexual fantasies, but just the things in life. Like, do we want to have a career or do we want to be a freelancer? Do we want to like live in this city versus that city? Do we want like, is it big town or, small island? Like all of these questions, you don't really like, I think it would be cool if we could streamline a way of like figuring out what we want without having to do so much trial and error. But is that just the whole process? Is it just trial and error?
I mean, also, yes. I don't know. Like, I like the thought of being like a child. Like, how does a child figure out what they want?
Mm-hmm.
And like, children do have to make kind of, elaborate decisions, especially if they're like playing make believe or something. They have to like overcome obstacles to get to a goal. And that seems pretty fun. I think like viewing like the process of figuring out what you want as fun is also pretty important, as opposed to like something to be dreaded. I think that a lot of people are really afraid of themselves, like afraid of coming to terms with themselves, or like afraid of what they're going to find if they look directly at themselves. And being afraid of yourself is also a part of yourself, right? And so like it's like also important to come to terms with like the fact of being afraid of yourself. So it feels like more like a process, is like as opposed to the goal. Like the goal is not to like get to the correct thing, but rather develop like a way of relating to getting to the thing that is fulfilling. And so like being very confused about what you want is like pretty cool. What's that like? let's explore what it's like to be very confused about what you want, and explore what it's like to like make the wrong choice and to like be wrong about what you want and to like be repressed and to be afraid. That's a part of it too.
Okay, so in those times where you have encountered, you're giving it a try and you're wrong. Some people experience that with a, deep fear of like finding themselves in a situation where they took a chance and they were wrong, and now they're damaged by the act of being wrong. How do you navigate that fear potentially, if you have it, or how have you navigated in the past, like trying something and realizing it wasn't for you, but now that's happened? Like, do you ever feel damaged by any of your experimentations?
I don't think I really feel damaged. I think maybe the one thing I feel damaged by is maybe something like around being in the public image. I think maybe I was driven to be in the public eye through some sort of deep-seated insecurity about not being taken seriously when I was younger. Maybe it's genetic, who the fuck knows? But there's something about now that I have it, it's been like causing, I think, a lot of cognitive damage that I wasn't aware was part of the choice. Uh, I don't know. It's like, what do you wish should go happen differently? Like, what do you really wish? Like, do I wish that I had been a different person such that I wasn't driven by this? Like, well, no, not quite. Like, I really have a lot of compassion for those circumstances, and I'm not sure I would have really changed much. Uh, so I don't know. Like if you really think about it, like this was sort of inevitable. And now I'm in like an interesting position where I get to like investigate, the quote unquote damage, relate to other people who have the same kind of damage. I don't know. It's pretty fun.
So how are you investigating status right now in your Substack?
Well, I started thinking about it slowly. It's been many years of slow thinking about it, but I noticed that after I rose in status and then people started treating me differently. And that was big. I remember I would go to a party and then suddenly people would be looking at me in a way they hadn't been looking at me before. Or like I'd be sitting in a group conversation and people would turn to me and ask me a question to try and draw me into the conversation. I'd be like, that is new. People were not before interested in hearing what I had to say. And so it's like this weird subtle thing where I'm not sure people were aware they were doing it. And it was like hard to pinpoint because it was always like a level of plausible deniability. Like if this had happened my whole life, I never would have noticed that it was, a reaction to something. And so I was like, wait, so to what degree and I also felt this myself, like being like introduced to people much more powerful than me and like feeling my own behavior change in their presence. And I was just watching myself become a different person. I was like, what the fuck is happening to me?
Right.
I am saying different things. My physical tension in my body has completely shifted. I'm extremely confused. And then also I was getting into learning about primates for sex reasons, because I'm like, how do primates do sex? Like, what are the incentives here? And then a lot of stuff, like, for example, chimpanzees, like the power hierarchies are really insane. And I'm like, wow, actually the power hierarchy is built into like the way these chimps function, like biologically. To a degree, like orangutans, or when an orangutan becomes an alpha male, I don't know if you already know this, but he develops physical phalanges on his face. Like there's a physical biological response to being like the top guy. And so I'm like, interesting. So there's a lot of like biological precedent for hierarchy and status competitions and power to be like really ingrained from a very deep level, like around the same amount degree, perhaps even more, of sex in some ways. And so like, okay, so that like watching my behavior change, watching other people's behavior change, learning about how monkeys' behavior change, I was like, runs way deeper than people are talking about. And I've like read some people talking, like Impro talks about like status games in improvisation, which is really cool. But then like the more I started thinking about this, the more I saw like almost everything that can be done can be viewed through this lens, like fashion or podcast interviews,
right.
or like
totally
saying things on the internet, or having beliefs at all, or like having an identity, a sense of like, what do you want to be? How do you want to think of yourself? Why is this thing shameful? Like, why are you afraid of admitting a thing that you desire? All of this like ultimately comes down to, I think, it's like being like a fear of being low status, or some people do deliberately, I think, try to be low status out of fear of being high status, because being, well known can have some downsides, obviously. So there's like an interesting like tensions and just like the way that people try to figure out like the best local advantage for where they are socially is pretty cool. I don't know, I'm rambling, but yeah.
No. I was just thinking, like, how does that? So how do you square? Because like typically we like to think that being high status and publicly high status. So there's high status and then there's public. And we typically associate, most of the time, if you are well known, it is because you are high status. That's not always the case, because you can be well known for a very bad reason, as we know.
Yeah.
Theory. In theory, that can happen. But like, how do you relate your unexpected, like, cognitive sort of obstacles or difficulties or struggles that have resulted from being public? How does that square with it also correlating with a rise in your status?
Like how did rising in status correlate with the costs of status?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, like rising status is almost it is not extricable from the cost of it. Like, if you are a king, your job is to make the rulers the populace happy, and if you don't, they depose you. In a sense, the rule of kings is not absolute. You have to be like. So the narrative of a king is that you sort of are elected to serve the nation, and you sort of give back in some way, and so you are elevated, but you have to like be earning your position. And a lot of like high status people, celebrities, you can see this tension between like having earned it versus not. If people are providing a lot of art, everybody's sort of okay with their status because the person is like sort of giving back. They've earned it correctly by producing things that everybody likes. Whereas people who aren't, like for example, the Kardashians is a great example. They're people popularly view them as like not having given back. Like, why are you a king? What have you given to us? You gave us like we get to look at your hot body and your big butt. Like people generally don't consider this to be like a fair trade. And so there's just like this weird negotiation going on, this like subconscious or this subtle under the surface like tension, where if you are climbed too high above your station, we're going to tear you down. And you see this all the time. People who are like celebrities or YouTubers or something, and then they say the wrong thing, and then everybody turns on them and sinks their fangs in or whatever. It's like you failed to walk that very delicate tightrope line, and like deserving to be there. And so I think, again, I am a little bit weird because of the weird thing where I'm high and low status in different fields. So it's something like non-standard is happening here. I forgot what I was saying, but yeah.
Yeah, no. You were talking about how the cost of status is part of the status. And I'm wondering, like, you mentioned that there's things about becoming a public person that have had some, unexpected consequences, psychological for you. And I'm wondering, like, how do you hold, like, does that make you, like, what are you afraid of? What, actually, let's just say, like, what are those consequences and how are you handling them?
Yeah, I'm afraid of people not liking me. I like it when people like me. I like it when people are like, wow, Ayla's so cool. And then if they're like, wow, Ayla sucks, I'm like, damn, that sucks. And there's a way where I wish I didn't care. I wish I were like the kind of person that didn't care. And in some ways I'm becoming that person. Like I have like emotional processing and updates, and then I managed to be like, actually, you know what? I care about what I'm producing, and then fuck what everybody else thinks. And that's great. It's lovely when this happens. But if you just increase the scale, you sort of have to repeat this process over time.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me more afraid of thinking clearly, because some subconscious part of me is like, if you think the wrong thoughts, you will suffer social consequences. It's made me more averse to taking risk because I have more to lose now. I have like a reputation and followers and whatever. And I'm like, man, losing now would be way worse than if I lost 5 years ago. I am much more distrusting socially. Like I've had, like the higher you climb in rank, the more people can gain by like sort of using you or something. You become like a more valuable resource. So I've had some friends like turn out to not be friends in ways that were really sad. I don't know, stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's real.
Yeah. Also stalkers. Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Security cameras, and then good contact with the police, and then weapons. Yep.
Aye.
I actually have no active stalkers right now that I'm aware of. I might have some that I'm not aware of, but yeah. But this is rare. Typically, my entire, like, it's been like 10 years since I haven't had a stalker.
That's so sad. And wow. Okay. All right. Cool. I'm glad that you see whatever you're doing seems to be working to discourage.
Yeah. Maybe it's just I'm aging, and like people are like, oh, she's slightly less hot than she used to be. So whatever.
Oh, man, is that like, in terms of talk about status, is that like just a real and inevitable thing for women that like if you get to a certain age, there's just like nothing you can do, your status just like drops, and is that a thing you think about?
Yeah, well, I mean, status gained from beauty drops. Like the way I think about status is having a thing other people want. That's like, and then people knowing that you have something that other people want, basically.
Got it.
And like being hot is something people want. Like it just is unabashedly correct that being hot is high status. I mean, it comes off with trade-offs. Again, like being high in a hierarchy means that there's costs and whatever. But yeah, you definitely lose that part.
Are you afraid of losing that part?
Yeah, I would prefer not to. Being hot is really fun. I really like guys trying to fuck you. You know, it's such a delightful experience.
It's true. I'm not going to argue.
Yeah, it's great. I like going on the street and getting catcalled. I'm like, hell yeah. Trying to milk it for as much as it's worth for the next couple years.
Okay, good. Here's a question. So you're very, very open about so many things. Have you discovered that there are certain things that you think should remain private, or does everything benefit from being open about it?
I have competing values here. On one hand, I value radical transparency and honesty in the sense that like it seems good for at least somebody to not be hiding who they are, because everybody's sort of hiding who they are in the ways that they think are going to be unpalatable. And I'm like, we should at least have one person out there who's just not doing any of that, just to see what like it's like to be a human mind. And unfortunately, the desire to be open and fully transparent is not correlated with being a typical human mind. So, but whatever, we'll take it. We'll take baby steps here. So I have this value. It just seems like good. Just to, like, I know that I've benefited historically a lot from seeing other people who were really unashamed of themselves and like very open about things that I was afraid to be open about. And I was like, oh, this is an example of a way somebody can really accept something about themselves. That means I know that they accept this about me. And it was like, I felt really accepted and loved for the first time, you know, in these ways.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, if I can do that for myself, maybe I can be that for others. But also, I don't know. I feel like for the first time in the last maybe year or so, I've started to notice that I'm not saying things online that maybe I would have otherwise. And I don't fully understand this desire. I think it's like some kind of fear or fatigue, or because it does take a lot out of you to have a lot of people have opinions about your soul. I don't know if you know anything about that. But.
I don't know. Theoretically. Here's a question. You've done a bazillion surveys. I've taken part in a number of them. And I wonder, have you discovered, has anything that has come your way as a result of those surveys ever surprised or unsettled you?
Definitely yes. But often I update very quickly and then I forget which things were surprising. But like, I remember one really interesting thing is that non-binary males are very different than transgender women. Because so like gender identity has like lots of impact in sexuality. If you know somebody's trans, this like really strongly informs fetishes, for example, which is pretty cool. And so I sort of naively thought that there was like a spectrum from like very cis to very trans and being non-binary somewhere in the middle. And like if you're non-binary, maybe you have like half of the sexual predictive power that somebody who's trans has. But this is actually not the case. Like as specifically for males, not females. Like assigned male at birth. If you're male and identifying as non-binary, usually you're more extreme in various directions than those who are transgender women, which is really interesting. I don't really understand this, and so I don't know what's going on there. That's one example.
Okay, cool.
Or spanking causes spanking fetishes later in life, or rather, it's correlated. Who knows about causation? But roughly speaking, if you spank your kids are like roughly 2x as likely to have a fetish later in life. I mean, it's like relative. It's something like, it depends on how you're measuring, but it's like roughly like from 10% to 20% or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I could see that making sense because there's something like, well, here's an example. Like how much does trauma associate or correlate with specific kink fetishes?
I think it correlates a lot, but maybe not for the reasons you think. This is one of the big open questions I have. It's really hard to disentangle because in general, all weirdness correlates. If you're like neurodivergent, you're more likely to be transgender. You're more likely to have weird fetishes. You're also more likely to have anxiety. You're more likely to, like all deviance in a way correlates with itself. And so it's very difficult to tease these things apart. It's like, does being trans make you autistic, or is it just like downstream of if you have like something kind of unusual going on with your brain? Unclear. And so there are things, and these things are correlated with adverse childhood experiences also. But it's like unclear to what degree your parents genetically are also high anxiety and sort of neurodivergent in a way that like causes greater trauma. Because if you are more anxiety, more depressed, you're less likely to be successful in life, lower socioeconomic status, more likely to be religious, more likely to abuse your children. It's all, correlation. Obviously, it's not set in stone. And so it's unclear to me what degree, like, for example, spanking your kids is the thing that causes the fetish versus like, there's something genetically going on where the kinds of people more likely to spank their kids are the kinds of people more likely to pass on spanking genes. Who knows? This is like, really, I have, I'm not really sure what's going on. I've done like some things to try and get at the answer, but the evidence is not very strong in either direction.
Yeah. Like, what about, not childhood trauma, but just like adulthood trauma? Does that correlate with kink?
It also correlates with weirdness too. Unfortunately, people who report anxiety and depression, women report much higher rates of being sexually assaulted as adults, even if they're not sexually assaulted as children, which is really weird. I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's something about like environment growing up. Like maybe you're in a more stressful environment, you're more likely to be sexually assaulted. Like, I don't know. In general, I think, lower odds than most people on fetishes being environmentally caused. I think, and it probably depends a lot on the fetish, because different fetishes like occupy different parts of the brain. And it's possible that like, all the feet fetishes, like that's just genetic, but the other ones are caused by experience. Really unclear. But in general, like, for example, BDSM, I think, is generally pretty hardwired. I don't think that's caused by childhood. It might be like influenced a little bit by childhood, but in the same way like being gay is. Like your relationship to being gay, maybe the kinds of guys that you like if you're a man is impacted by your upbringing. But like the thing that causes you to be gay is some sort of deep wiring, hormonal, genetic, unclear. And so, but that's for BDSM, for example, which is like extremely predictive. But then like maybe if you go into like a rarer one, like you watch, like watching people dress up in fursuits and then pee into each other's mouths. I'm like, I don't know about that. There weren't fursuits in our ancestral environment. But like maybe you have like a disposition that sort of, gets wired. Like one example is, maybe you're like hardwired to be aroused by accidental exposure. But if you're raised in like a Muslim country versus, Western America, what counts as accidental exposure is going to be very different. So you might become like obsessed with ankles in the Muslim country and then obsessed with like the underside of butt cheeks in the American culture, even if like the underlying drive is the same thing. So like my current working theory is that you have underlying drives that are pretty innate into some degree, but like the manifestation of them can be influenced a lot by the culture themselves. But you don't really have control over the underlying thing.
But
again, who knows? I don't know. I have maybe the most data in the world about this, and I really don't know.
So, data. Does it help us figure out the truth? Does it obscure the truth? Are we getting closer to the truth with more data? Is it helping? Is it hurting? Seems like it's helping, right? It's good to know more things generally. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you have a problem such that you are going to be interpreting data to fit your preconceptions, that this is going to exist whether or not you have the data. And the data is not going to serve to like change your preconceptions in one way or the other. So I don't know. I love data. I love measuring everything possible. It's just like you get to learn more things about the world. I don't understand. Everybody's like, Aella, why do you do so many surveys and ask so many questions and track everything? And I'm like, why are you not doing that? It seems like obviously clearly the thing that everybody should be doing.
All right. Okay. So I guess the big takeaway from this conversation is everyone should be doing more surveys of the people in their life.
Absolutely.
Just for the heck of it.
Yeah, because we have a lot of theories about the world that maybe you could help update yourself a little bit if you like systematically asked all of your friends and acquaintances. Just test your theory.
Okay. How do you just choose what to do for a survey?
Like, well, first you have to have a question.
Okay, so how do you find your question?
Well, maybe you're having a debate with a friend. Oftentimes this will come out of like debates with a friend, or people are having a conversation, like, where do fetishes come from? Oh, well, I was spanked as a child. That's where I'm spanked. And then maybe you're like, is that true? Or did you just, and then you're like, how would we test this? I mean, the spanking thing is like particularly hard, but I'm trying to think if there's anything I've tested recently among my friends. Yeah, I think I was like, a bunch of my male friends nap really easy, and I can't nap to save my life, and my other friend, who's a girl, can't nap. And I was like, is this gender? Do men just fall asleep easier? And then I went and did a
fall
survey.
asleep in everything. Sleeping is my superpower. I can fall asleep anywhere.
Wow.
Maybe I'm an outlier.
Well, you're not actually. There's no correlation, at least in the at least it didn't show up in the sample size I got, which isn't a guarantee, but it's like pretty good evidence. It's enough evidence that I'm like, okay, probably this is not what's going on. Yeah, so my hypothesis was disproven. But I checked, and now I know a little bit more about the world. And everybody can do that.
I guess maybe, do you, I guess you have your process is like extremely scientific, like, here's a thing where I'm like, oh, maybe this correlates with being like, maybe napping is a guy thing. So that you just like automatically find a way to like system. But I'm just wondering, like, for those who don't spend their daily lives doing the scientific method, can you just explain the steps really quick?
Well, I don't know about steps, but I like thinking of it like trying to figure out which universe you're in. Like, maybe we're in a universe where the men nap easy, and maybe we're in a universe where they don't. And I have to figure out which one I'm in. And then I see maybe a piece of evidence. Like, I talk to a guy and he naps really easy. I'm like, okay, how much does this update me? Like, I have sort of I just imagine like kind of scales on one universe versus the other. And I'm like, okay, if I meet a guy who naps easy, this maybe tilts the scales a little bit. But I could imagine if I'm in a universe where men don't nap easy, that like maybe I accidentally just found a random guy. So it doesn't tip the scales very much. It just tips a tiny bit. So there's like a distribution of evidence kind of thing going on. And so I think a big error people make is thinking that evidence has to be like definitive in one way or the other. Like either you prove the thing or you disprove the thing. And like this is like basically never how it works. You just have a bunch of scales in your head of like trying to figure out what kind of universe you're in. And you pile the observations into one versus the other. But you have to check also. You have to think, okay, if I weren't in this world, would I also see this? Which is a big problem that people have when they're trying to like do confirmation biasy things. They're like, oh, you're guilty. But then I'm like, okay, well, imagine a world where you're not guilty. What evidence would you expect to see in that world too? Would it be consistent? And like, okay, well, if it is consistent, then it's not actually evidence for that world. So there's just a lot. I think that feels like really underlying it, because like a lot of people think about the scientific method as being very formal. Like you have to put on a lab coat and then you have to follow the very specific steps. And some of the steps are there for a good reason. Like registering a hypothesis is important because it means that you can't like sort of reverse engineer the results after you're done. But if you genuinely are just trying to figure out which world you should put more weight into, and you actually want to know the answer, then usually it's like sort of you can kind of figure it out. You figure out you like, oh, I think the world is based on this evidence. You go to talk to some people, maybe they have some good points, and you're like, actually, maybe I put the evidence in the wrong bucket. Maybe the evidence should go in the other one. If you just like have that drive, like I learned a lot about doing science by trying to do science and then fucking up. That's the best way to learn how to do science.
It's best way to learn anything, honestly. So yeah, put that out there too. Okay, Aella, where can everyone find you and follow your stuff and learn more about you?
Yeah, I write on aella.substack.com, aella.substack. And I also have a website with more stuff on it at knowingless.com, like the opposite of knowing more. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Thank you so much, Aella, for a great combo.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your questions are awesome.
Oh, thanks.